I'm going to show how to make a glitter effect using Affinity Photo's procedural texture filter. Someone asked me if it was possible to make glitter with the procedural texture filter, and I'd done some similar effects before, but I thought I would try it. So I watched some videos that showed how to make a glitter effect with Photoshop, and I thought it would be fairly easy to do something similar with the procedural texture filter. I'm going to make 3 different types of glitter, starting with just simple noise and then going with sort of a granular noise-like effect, and then finally some that includes a combination of a number of different functions to get a overall effect. And this is sort of the most complicated one here that I did, I'm using on the background for the screen here. To get started, I'll start with a new document, and I'm going to make this one 1920 by 1080 so that I can zoom in at it and show some of the detail on the glitter. Make sure it's in RGBA 8 mode and create that, and then I'm going to fill this with black. And choose the Move tool and then add a live procedural texture filter. I'll start with a new equation and assign it to all 3 channels. And so for the simplest type, what I'm just going to do is noise of XY. And I'm going to make this, the type of noise I'm going to use is noisei of XY. So every pixel is a different random value of noise, and it just looks like that. And then I'm going to add a adjustment layer, and I'm going to add a gradient map to this. And I'll just start with the default so you can see how I build this up. Usually it'll work out best if you start with dark and go to light. This pattern it won't matter too much, but I'm going to do it this way anyway. So I'm going to start with sort of a dark brown because I want to have a gold effect here. So I'm going to desaturate that a little bit and move it a little bit more towards the orange. So start with that, and then in the middle I'll make it a nice gold color. Gold will work out better if it's just slightly towards the orange, and nice and saturated about there. And then up here I can just go mostly white, but maybe just a hint of yellow. So there's the basic pattern. I'm going to drag that on top of my layer so I have everything all in one layer. And so I could add a custom input and maybe actually 2, and I'll just call this I1 and this one OF1 for an offset. And this will be the, I'll call it fader, and I'll just call this one offset. This one will sort of be how much of the noise you get, and that'll be the offset. Now I'm going to use a cool function that I've been looking at, and I've never really used it before, but it's FMA. And so that does a multiply and an add in one built-in hardware function. So in the graphics card on your computer, this function is built native to the graphics card, so it's very fast. All right, so in the 2 values I'm going to multiply by I1 and then add offset 1 to this. And right now it doesn't look like anything. As I bring this down, it'll get darker, and then I can add an offset to this, and so I can have an amount of this, as much of it as I want. So it'll be as much variation as you want. So the fader controls the amount of variation, and this one controls how bright it is, or dark. And so, yeah, so that's the first one just based on noise. I'm going to add a artistic text, and I'll just call it glitter. And I'm going to change the font, and I think, oops, I have to choose the Move tool first, I think. And That one looks pretty good, but I think I'm going to do the Broadway. That's pretty good. Like that, and just sort of center this, and then I'm going to change it to white because I'm going to use it as a mask, and that way if I drag it on top of the layer, it will mask out that part. And then if I add a new layer and put that down here on the bottom, I can fill that with black again. And now if I go back to my controls, I can adjust this to give it some different effects. So that's the most basic type of glitter effect. It's just based on noise. If I zoom in on this, it's just random pixels. Every pixel is a different random value. The second type of glitter I saw had more of a granular texture. So instead of just completely random noise, it had little granules, it looked like. And so I'm going to show how to do something similar to that. To do that, I'm going to add a second equation to this one. I'm going to turn off this equation, turn off the alpha, and turn this on. I'm also going to go into this layer and turn off the gradient map and the glitter. And then go into the live procedural texture filter. And for this one, I'm going to delete these, at least for now. I'll probably add those back in later, but I like it organized in a certain way. So I'm going to start with a variable v equals vec2 of relative x and relative y, so a two-element vector, and then my relative x and relative y enables me to move this around, times a divided by w. A is going to be my scaling factor, so down here I'm going to have a scaling factor, let's call it scale, and set that up to, I guess, 10 for now. And then w is the width of the document in pixels. Now when I thought of doing this, I thought, okay, I'm going to use a Perlin noise, and maybe that'll give me a good random effect. So I started with Perlin, and I like the perlincubic. That's sort of the smoothest version of the Perlin noise. And then I'm going to use my coordinate vector v, and I'm going to add a octave, so I have to have in here. Now that, I'm going to just leave it at 10, so I don't think we need more octaves than that. As you add each octave to the noise, you make it a little smaller. So S is the factor that you multiply it by to make it smaller. So if S is 0.5, each successive octave is half as big as the previous one. If S is 0.2, it might be only 2/10 as big as the previous one. All right, so I need to put in my S value, which I'll use a 0 to 1 custom input. I'll label that smooth. So there it is, there's my noise. Now it doesn't look very much like little particles. So I'm going to try scaling this up. So if I set this up to about 200, now it's starting to look more particulate-like. And to me it looks a little bit like carpeting, or little moss or something like that. So that's okay. But then I thought, if I do use the harmonic cubic, perlincubic, and then take the absolute value of that, like that, now it actually looks a little more like particles. So it looks like little granules of something. And this is what I like this one. So I like this effect. I think it looks pretty good. It's fairly easy to implement and add more noise to it, but I thought this looked pretty good. So where it's negative, it'll flip over and come back up the other way, and that leaves this dark sort of outline around each grain. Okay, so that's sort of my second one. Again, I could add a fader and an offset to this, and so I will call it I1 and OF1, and I'll just label this fader and offset. And I'm going to wrap this in an FMA function, multiply add, and then I'm going to, the second element here will be I1 to multiply, and then the next one is OF1, which will add it. Okay, and so I can adjust the intensity and add it like that. And so I'm going to zoom out now. Let's try this with the text and this. So this is the second one, and I'm going to bring this up to maybe 300 or 400, and I'm going to increase this to make it more glittery, something like that. So that's the second glitter effect that I came up with. For my third glitter effect, I wanted to have a lot more variation in it. So instead of just having one size grain, I thought it'd be neat to have sort of a large grain and a very fine grain like you see over here. And then I also thought it would be nice to have different areas that were brighter, like over here it's pretty bright, and then other areas where it was darker. And so I'm going to have those do that, and have some areas with fine grain, some areas with a more coarse grain, and then areas of light and dark. So I'm going to add all those things to the procedural texture filter. So to get started, I'll turn off the color and the word glitter, and then go back to the procedural texture filter, and I'm going to add another equation and turn off this one and turn it on down here. And I'm going to copy and paste this one though to get started, and instead of my FMA, I'm going to take this off of there. I'm going to delete all of that. I'm going to make this into a variable. T1 equals the absolute value of this. So there's my T1. Now instead of having all of my gain here on the scale, I'm going to multiply this one by a factor, and I'm going to multiply it by B1, I think I'll call it. I'm going to add a B1 down here as a real input, and I'm going to make it be 10. And I'm going to change this to 10. So there are my large grains. And then I'm going to take and copy variable T1, add a semicolon, paste it here. And this will be, I'm going to change that to T2, and I'm going to change this B to a B2. And down here, I'm going to add a B2. And this one will be grain size 1, and this one is going to be grain size 2. Oops. And I'll just make this one 20. So this one is smaller than the other one. Now I'm going to use a interpolate between the two grain sizes, and I'll just show how that works first, and then I'm going to have use another function to interpolate between them. But let's look at the interpolate function first to see how that works. So to do that, I'm going to temporarily put in a 0 to 1 range input, and I'm going to call this I2. And I'll just label it interpolate, or interp. And the interpolate function, I'm going to use the sign interpolation, which is SERP. And then I'm going to interpolate between texture 1 and texture 2, and I'm going to use this I2 slider to go between those two. So let's see how that looks. So right now it's all the way over to 1, so that means it's only grain size 2. If I move this the other way, now it's only grain size 1. But if I go in between these two, then it's sort of a mixture of grain size 1 and grain size 2. Now, but what I really want to do is only have it, in some places I want it to have grain size 2, other places grain size 1, and in between I want to gradually fade between those two sizes. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to create, instead of using I2 as my value, I'm going to create another texture, which will be variable T3, and that's going to be the interpolating texture. So I'm going to use a texture to interpolate between the two sizes, and I'm going to use the perlincubic texture. So I'm going to put in another perlincubic. This time I'm not going to use the harmonic because I want it to be in the range from 0 to 1. And I know the perlincubic function sometimes generates values that are outside of that range, but that's okay. I'll put in a B3 value to scale this, and I'll have 10 octaves, and then I'm going to use S divided by 2 because I want this to be smoother than the other one. And so over here I'm going to have T3. And now I've got to add a B3 value, so I'm going to take out this interpolate. I don't need that anymore. And I'm going to add another real input. And this will be B3. And this will be the, I'll call it the interpolate size. And I'll just set that to 1. Okay, and so you can see here I have large grains, here I have fine grains. Now this looks, I think there's too much range in the grains. So I'm going to set this one to 20. Now they're the same size, and I'll set this one to 30. So that isn't too bad. Now if I double click here, it looks pretty good. If I bring these, so they're, one thing that you want to watch out for, if these are close together, like right here, you get this streaking effect. It's like the patterns are too close together, and it's real noticeable here. If you drag it over here, not as noticeable, but you don't want these numbers too close together. So I'll just make this one 25 and that one 10. And then this, if this is too big, you can make it 0.5. It depends on how much you want it, how rapidly you want it to change between the large grains and the small grains. I'll probably just leave it 1 for now. And then you can also change the overall scaling on it to change to a different value. So I'll just leave it like that for now. I'm going to try this out and see what it looks like. So there's my glitter. It's now got a little bit more variation in it, and I think to make it more glitter-like, I think I need to make this a little bigger. Maybe, let's try 30. And so that's that type of glitter. Right, I'm going to turn that off again for now. And then the other thing I want to do is I want it to be darker in some areas and lighter in some areas. So I think I've got everything here. I've got the two textures, I'm interpolating between them, and so I want to make it darker and lighter. So I'm going to add in another variable. I'll copy my T3. It's going to be very similar to that one, and paste it right here. And this is going to be T4. It's also a perlincubic, and this one I want to be even smaller. So I'm going to have a B4, and this is going to be, I think I'll divide by 4. I want this one even smoother. And so I have to add in another B4 variable. And this will be the, I'll call it the fade size. And I'll just set this to 1. I'm going to bring this one up to 2. What I want to do is multiply this, but I want it to be able to control the range. So I'm going to add another fader and offset here. So that is 0 to 1 and a -1 to 1. And I'll call this, I'm going to call it I4 because I'm going to apply it to texture 4. I'm going to call this one offset 4. And I'll just call this fader 4 and offset 4. And I'm going to do an FMA on T4, and I'm going to multiply this by that. And then I'll put an I4 in here and a OF4 in there. And let's see, so it's going to multiply, scale it, and add. So I think that will work out well. Okay, so there's my scale. I'm going to bring it down to 0.5, and then I can make this darker. Now right now it's not too good, but I can control, so I'll have these areas where in some places it's brighter, some places it's darker. So I have two different variations. I have large grain to smaller grain and brighter and darker. So let's take a look at that one. So now this you can see the darker areas. You can drag this around. You can adjust this a little bit. You can adjust this here. Now you could add some other scaling factors up here, but I'm just going to leave it like this for now. You can make it fancier if you want to. Next thing, and then I'm going to add one more thing. And so it might be nice to be able to add in your noise again. So I'm going to add this noise value from up here. I'm going to copy that and add it on down here. But I'm going to change one thing. I'm going to make this harmonic noise because when I'm adding it to a pre-existing texture, I want it to go both positive and negative. So I'm going to change that to an H and add that on here. And then this value should control the amount of that. And so I can control that with this slider I already had set up. So you could add in just a little bit of purely random noise and see how that goes. And so that would be completely random, or you can just add in a subtle amount of that if you want to. And then if I go up to change this to 10, it looks something like that, so it's more of a chunky effect. Now I might like to have an overall scaling. I think I want to have some overall scaling on this part of it. So I'm going to actually put in another FMA, and this will be, I'll call it T3, and then comma I3 and OF3. Okay, let's do that. So I'll add one of these and one of these. This will be I3, and this one will be for fader, for the main texture, I'll just call it fader 3. This one is OF3, and that will be offset for this interpolated texture 3. And that way I can bring it down the overall brightness or contrast of this pattern and control it independently. And I like this better, a little bigger, I think. So something like that. Now you could, instead of just using a random, like right now it's, these shadows are sort of random, but instead of using just random blotches like this, you could do like a wave pattern, stripes, or a wave pattern or something else. So it has you know, a different effect there. I'm just going to leave it like this. If you want to mess around with that, then that's on you. The other thing that sometimes when you do a gold pattern, it has some banding. I'm going to set this up. I think I'm going to make these a little bigger. So I'm going to go and put the overall scale back down at 10 and zoom in on this a little bit. I think I'll take the random noise down. But another thing that usually with gold, if you want to make nice gold, you can add these bands in here. So I'd put in like 3 of these things close together, 3 points close together, and then make one either bright or dark. So I'm going to make down here on the dark side, I'm going to put in a bright one, and then over here I'll put in some things close together, but then put like a dark band in here. This one I'm going to make it sort of greenish, actually. I'll just bring that down like that and maybe desaturate a little bit like that. So these sort of and now I think I don't have any of these showing up, so I'm going to go back and adjust my faders and offset to pick up some of this stuff a little bit more. But sometimes those can add a little more gold-like character to your overall pattern. I think I'll increase this again up to about 20. So that's the overall glitter effect. That's what I came up with. You can mess around with this, see if you can come up with something else, but that's sort of how I did it. I tried a couple other variations on it before I settled on this one. This one was actually simpler than some of the other ones I came up with, so I did try to simplify it a little bit. But there's some other stuff you can do. The cell noise could also be the basis of a glitter, and you can do some other stuff with that. Anyway, let me know if you have any comments or questions, and thanks for watching.